All right. Now you're all hype again. All right. I love it. So stay that way. Stay engaged. Stay ready to listen and hear from God. We do have a bumper video for Pastor Tab. Who knew? All right. There we go. There she is, the woman of the hour. Hey, I do want to say real fast before we introduce her, I tell people all the time that growing up as a pastor's kid, you know better than anyone else that the role of a pastor is more entrepreneurial than anyone ever realizes. You see Tab, she's going to come share her heart in a moment, but you saw her singing. She was getting the kids' stuff ready this morning. So there's a lot of shifting gears and doing different roles, but we never want to take for granted the fact that God has instilled something in her heart, and she has a word for us today. So give it up. Big round of applause for Pastor Tab.
Expectation. Yeah, I'm gonna take my earring off. Is that better? Okay. How are you? Good. I love having my kids in here today. This is just the energy I'm looking for. I did not know there was a bumper video, so sorry for those online that did not see Joe's wonderful introduction of me. That was the kindest he's ever been in my whole life. Not really. He's probably, it's actually probably next to impossible for him to be rude. So his wife said I disagrey. We're not going to go there. So that's in the context of marriage, and I'm not in it, so it's beautiful. Pastor Paul and Pastor Perry Ann are home today, and she's doing great, which is phenomenal. And also, there was a moment where we had thought her surgery was going to be this coming week. So at staff meeting, hi Rosalie, hi. At staff meeting, we did not talk about today and like what needed to be done, because I was like, oh cool, y'all are going to do all of it. And then last night at 8:30, I realized, this is my responsibility today. Cool. So I didn't know that we had a bumper video, but Sam is a genius, and he makes all these incredible things and makes us look good, so it's wonderful. Hi to Sam and Kylie, who are in Galveston having the best time of their life. So as I prepared, do I feel really loud to y'all? Can we fix that? Because I'm like scaring myself a little. As I prepared this message this week, I worked on this message for 4 days. And I got nowhere in 4 days. I had probably one of the biggest anxiety attacks to date over this message. And it was a massive, colossal unraveling. And you guys get to see the remnants of that today, so I'm really excited. You and I are both going to discover our message at the same time. And so I'm really excited for us to be in this together. And we'll see. We'll see where we land today, okay? I had a whole PowerPoint made. I really felt like the Lord gave me a word for this message. And I mean a singular word, a one, not like a prophetic, like a lengthy, descriptive. No. One single word, and it was context. And I was like, yeah, that's good, God. I can see what you're doing. Yes, I will make this word. I will make this message. 4 days. Crashed and burned. He said, no. He said no again, and then he said no again. So yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, not in the morning, that would have been really more dramatic, but 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I trashed everything I had, and I rewrote. And I really felt that the Lord was saying to share my story. And a lot of you may think that you've heard pieces of my story, right? You've heard an actual, how many of you have heard the tragic side of my story? Yeah, great. So there was more to me before that moment of tragedy. So that's the stuff that I'm going to share today to give a little bit more context. to who I am and also to where I'm at right now and what God's doing right now in my life. And we'll see where it goes. So here's my story in a tiny little nutshell. So I grew up in the Abbey. I've been here since I was 5. I'm 33-ish, I think. It's 23. I'm 33. So I've been here since I was 5. I've been on the worship team since I was 14. I drank, you could say I drank from the well of this house. Not the actual well. If you drink from our actual well, you will get the screaming memes, if you know what I mean, and your stomach will be disturbed for days. I'm talking about the spiritual well. I drank from this spiritual well. This was the context to my life, okay? This was the context of how God was introduced and shaped to me. And alongside what I was taught here, I had a pretty high ability to observe and adjust, right? So I could walk into a room or be in an environment, and I could quickly see what was valued, celebrated, expected. And I would adjust to that because my little self loved and needed acceptance. And that was the quickest way to get it. So it wasn't hard to be a high observer and to have those skills in this house, because this house celebrated freedom, authenticity, and relationships. So that wasn't hard for me, right? My leaders did guide me at times, but they didn't police me. It wasn't my spirituality, my spiritual journey was not a thing that was policed, that was heavily monitored or managed. And they often, when I needed it, they often guided me back to God, right? Like when I would even approach them and ask them questions or found myself in a moment of affliction or trial, it was even in those moments that they wouldn't say, well, here's what you need to do. It was in those moments that they said, what's God saying? They pushed me back to Jesus. So fast forward in my college years, I was trying to figure out what in the world I wanted to do with my life. Anybody ever been there? Like, why is that line in life so early? I don't understand. But I found myself excited about the potential of getting a worship degree. And I found a Christian college that was close to home because I wanted to commute back and forth. I wanted to lead worship here because I had been here since I was 5. So, like, you get rooted pretty deeply. And I'd been on the worship team since I was 14. So it was hard to leave, right? That's where things began to spiral really fast. I got accepted into Christian college, and it was rough. The school was AG, and to be honest, I had no idea what AG meant. I thought it had to do with agriculture, and I was like, okay, we came from the ground, like love the Lord. Sure, I'm here for it, fine. I mean, most of the ground like makes me have allergy attacks, but it's fine. God's working on it. So I decided to start majoring in the worship arts, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with AG churches. Okay, apparently AG is Assemblies of God, right? Not apparently, but it is. Apparently, within the Assemblies of God organization or structure, they have something called fine arts competitions. Fine arts competitions is like, they'll do scripture readings. You can compete in preaching a sermon. They'll do things like human videos. Do y'all remember what human videos are? Like when you dance interpretively to a Christian song. Okay, you with me? Okay. So they had these, it's like a big deal. Like if my husband was here, he would tell you it's a big deal. I had no reference point, none. So I get to this school, and this fine arts competitions is celebrated and highly valued, okay? Get to the school, people started talking about, asking me questions. What fine arts, competition did you do? Where did you place? And I was like, I was in choir one time at school. I don't know what you're saying. And and I just remember thinking, wow, I am so glad that I have never experienced a competition for worship. That makes me have the most anxiety I've ever. Like, I just couldn't fathom that. But that's what people loved. So I tried out for the worship team. I bombed. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And at this point, I'd been on the worship team since I was 14. Listen, my dad ran sound, so I'm going to talk about the sound team. It's not on his character. It's just where we were, guys. I stood in the back with no microphone. Like, my mic, I had a mic in my hand. It wasn't turned on. Okay. I also stood in the side and with no mic, and we just worshiped. Like, it was just, I was more of a lead worshiper, right? So that was the context I was in. I got to the point where, like, my mic turned on eventually, right? No harm on my dad. He did great. It was absolutely helpful and necessary. So I get to this school, I bombed, and my identity starts unraveling a little. I was not there to meet a husband. Fun fact, I was not there to meet a husband. But apparently I missed the memo that many people go there to graduate with their MRS degree, and I had no idea what that meant. No idea. MRS, like when you're married. So, people started pairing up like the second coming of the flood. And I started like panicking and looking around like there was Noah's Ark's gonna be, descended upon us anytime soon and collect us up. And I was like, I need a buddy. What am I gonna, I started assessing, right? Like, oh, this is what's valued, right? So slowly, I wasn't really looking, but then like the pressure was building little by little. I took all Bible classes because number one, that's what was available. Number two, I thought, I'm gonna graduate from here. So this is not gonna be a waste of time at all. I did not graduate from there. And I lost a whole semester because I took all Bible classes, which is fine, love the Bible, I'm here for it. It's not wasted now, but it took me a long time to figure out how that was not wasted because I had to pay for the cost of that year. Then I sat in more chapel services that had rule-based messages and performance-based messages than I've ever heard in my whole life. I did not understand. However, I'm super fine following the rules. Like, that has never been an issue for me, except for that one time in high school. Mom knows. That had never really been an issue for me. However, when I'm sitting there listening to someone on the stage, I also respect authority at this point in my life. Now I don't know so much. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But at this time, yeah, y'all got it. At this time in my life, I just anybody that was in authority or in a position, especially anybody with a mic, in a spiritual context, I took what they said, right? So to have these messages being now told to me of performance and rules and manage yourself, manage your spirituality, control, get it together. All of this started building, right? I actually loved, mainly a lot of those messages were done from white males, and I particularly loved the one that the white male did on biblical womanhood. That was a joy to listen to, his perspective on biblical womanhood. It was really nice. I met some friends there and became friends with these people. Alyssa was also attending college with me, and she met my friends, and she goes, yeah, no thanks. Like, off the bat. And at first I just thought, me and Alyssa, we're different in personality. So I just thought, oh, we just, drift to different people, right? We'll get there. Alyssa had a lot of discernment, and we will get there. I met a guy. I started dating him. And by this time, I had fully assessed what was expected and valued and celebrated. And I didn't have a problem following the rules. So I realized you are celebrated if you are here to find a spouse, if you're here to be a pastor, whether that's a senior pastor, youth pastor, kids pastor, or worship pastor. Didn't even know there was such a thing as a worship pastor before. I just thought that you had pastors and then they did the things, right? And then you have a team of leaders and then they do the things. We do the things. We are the house. I didn't understand. Or you're celebrated if you're there to be a missionary. None of those things are bad. Holy moly, none of those things are bad. I learned, I was more so there to just grow in my desire for music, right? My desire for, I knew enough to know that in my experiences of leading worship, I loved that place. I loved being a facilitator and a partner with bringing God's presence to this place for people to encounter him and be changed. I thought that was an incredible honor. I went to classes for it, and it sucked the joy right out of it. So then I was like, wow, I've just been doing it wrong my whole life, I guess. I've just been worshiping wrong my whole life because this is not any of my experience. So fast forward, the culture of the school was undergirded a lot by works-based and performance theology, which I'm not shaming them. They had a lot of hormonal teenagers and young adults coming into that place, and they had to manage. They had a huge responsibility, a lot of different denominations and experiences. So I'm not saying shame on you. I'm just identifying it was a different context, right? And so that context landed differently on me. I would not want their job, and nor am I shaming their job. The people that I made friends with and the guy that I was dating had grown up in this world, right? So they didn't find anything out of ordinary. They were not rocked. They were not in a culture shock at all. And so so I had been taught this context of God, the Bible. They had been taught this context of God, the Bible, and their destinies, right? I had not. So as you imagine, our differences in views and values and what we celebrated started to arise. They started to come to the surface eventually. And I wish I could tell you that like when it came to a head, when all of this started to identify itself, that we sat down together as very mature and capable, responsible adults, and we had a beautiful conversation of where our differences were. And we said, you know what? It's okay. We're going to navigate this beautifully. Nope. It blew the HE double hockey sticks up in the most catastrophic way. The end of my college experience, this was getting towards the end of the year. My end of the college experience looked like me and my boyfriend having a conversation at his house outside on the street at 12 o'clock in the morning. And he lived in Mesquite, and I lived here, so I had to drive home. And he said to me, it's not funny. It's not funny. It's not funny. He said to me that he would never open up to me. I would never see any of his struggles or challenges, and that he had, because it isn't even my place, nor is he required to share any of this with me, even if we were married. Cool. So I got to the point, it was at 12 a.m., and I thought, yeah, this isn't going to work at all. And so I left, and we had been talking this is just a side note, we had been talking for so long, we'd been arguing for so long. And just as a reminder, I'm like not a confrontational person at this point in my life, right? I'm like, go under the radar, stay low, do the things, check the boxes. So for me to like stand up in this moment and say, that's a load of crap, was actually a really huge deal, right? So fun fact, we had talked for so long that I drove home and I called my best friend and I was crying, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, I'm so thirsty. I just need water. Like that was the thing I was most upset about at that moment, is I needed water. And I was not going to stop anywhere at 1 o'clock in the morning in Dallas. And my mom raised me better than that. So then like a month or so later, I also received a really bad phone call from my friends that I had made, that Alyssa said, don't go there. And I walked into the room anyway. Like a horror movie, whenever you're like, don't do it. They just do it anyway. They called me and gave me this horrible horrible lashing that basically was like, how dare you did not tell us about your breakup? What kind of a friend are you? What kind of friends are we? This is so disrespectful. I can't even process this, and I don't even know what to do right now. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I was thrown, guys. So then I obviously didn't re-enroll in the school, and I was helping Alyssa move in the next period. So we didn't talk the whole summer, right? Me and my friends didn't talk the whole summer. Well, they're not really, I don't know what they were at that point. Friends, not friends. So I help Alyssa move in, and I get a text, and it's from one of my friends, and they said, we need to talk, and we need to discuss. I know you're on campus, and we need to talk and discuss what our friendship is going to look like moving forward. Okay. Alyssa, with her alarm of discernment, alarm going off in her head, she goes, no, you are not going to go to her room and have that conversation. If you are going to have that conversation, she was trying to convince me to just not have it, and I was anxious about that because I wanted togetherness and friendship and whatever. And I think she saw the terrorist attack that was coming, and she said, no, if you're going to have it, then you need to go have it in the dorm pastor's office. So we found ourselves in the dorm pastor's office, and one of my friends showed up. She wouldn't allow the other one to attend because the other one was so hurt by my actions. Sorry, I'm rolling my eyes now. It's not funny. That's how they felt. It's not funny. So she showed up, and for the next hour or 2 hours, I think, I was berated. My character, my intelligence, my worth, my value, berated. She stood in the corner. She would not even sit. She stood in the corner and repeatedly told me every failure, every fault, every wrong. And I'll quote her. She told me that she and my other friend regretted the day that they had ever become my friends. And she thought that the whole season of our friendship was a waste of time and her energy. From that day forward, I would be placed. She let me know, do not call me, do not text me, do not Facebook message me, never reach out to me ever again, because from this moment on, I will put you on a shelf that I put people that are non-existent to me, and that is where you will be forever. I wish I could make a joke. It's not funny. I was 21 years old, and if you know me, my mom can attest to this. Everyone in elementary school was my best friend. I called everyone my best friend, and so to have a friend at any caliber say that stuff to me, my whole identity unraveled. I had absolutely lost myself, and I just had no context, no preparation for that moment. In my life, my mom raised me. I loved and hated this. Loved it and hated it. When something would go wrong, when Matthew, my brother, would do something to like hurt me or whatever, and I'd come tattle, and I'd be like, Mom, Matthew, blah, 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 blah. The first thing out of her mouth was, what did you do? That's not what I'm here for, Mom. I'm here to tell you what he did. And so it taught me, like, there is reconciliation. There is two sides, and when both people are willing, there can be reconciliation, and it can be really beautiful. This was not that. So I did not have any frame of reference for a relationship that had no desire to reconcile. A few months later, this was a few weeks later. This is a side note. I wasn't going to say, but I'm going to say it. Pastor Paul called me into his office, and he's so kind. He called me into his office, and he goes, so, how are you doing? I'm just checking in. I didn't know because my identity had been wrecked, so I had no idea how to answer that question. And so I just started telling him everything that went on. Start from the beginning of my college experience, I just started telling him all the things. By the end of stringing that story together, when I was reflecting on it as a whole, I was so livid The amount of anger rolling off every pore of my body was monumentous. And what proceeded to come out of my mouth is, "What the F?" But I did not tailor any of it. I yelled it, not at him, but to him in his office. And I will never forget this moment. He sits back. He wasn't sitting on his leg probably, but he sits back and he goes, "There you are. We've missed you." I burst into tears. Because shouting a cuss word at your pastor out of pain, a lot of places would not be tolerated. So a few months later, that started a moment, that started an awareness for me. That started a process of me asking, God, where are you in this? So a few months later, I found myself, God gave me this picture that we were in like an office space, and it was all my stuff. It was my office of my life. And I had file cabinets for days, and I had everything on my desk was organized and neat and beautiful, colorful. It was really beautiful. And God just came in, calm as can be, and he started opening every drawer and pulling all of the stuff out, throwing the files all over the room. And this was like files of like my belief systems, what I've come to believe, what I come to know and value, and what's like appreciated and celebrated, like all of this stuff, right, for my whole life. This is 21 years worth of experiences, teachings, all laid out in a nice, beautiful, organized pattern. And he ripped it all to heck. I remember him taking his hand and going like this to my desk, and everything's on the floor. So my office is in complete disarray, right? And it was a very beautiful picture of where I was in this season and how my season felt. It felt wrecked. But then he invited me to come and sit on the floor and to pick up every item and to analyze it and to have a conversation. He invited me into a conversation with him about where that came from, if it belongs, and I just watched him trash a bunch of things that I had come to know as truth that kind of edged into law for me. This has happened 4 times in my life, that same visual. This has happened 4 times. This was the second. The third was when Dom and I lost Emmeline in 2019, our daughter. We were 1 week away from our due date. When I asked you to raise your hand, that was the story I was talking about. Most of you know. I didn't really realize until recently, that all of these moments in my life, the wreckage of my office, per se, of my life, had a theme, that each one had a significance. The first one in my college, the second one in my college experience, that really had a lot to do with how I related to peers. God was unraveling my identity in relationship to my friends. He was also starting the introduction into the covert and deadly effects of religion when it's been abused. I had no context for that before. So that started my journey of ruthlessly wanting to love people just for existing, because God of life created every single one of them. And that required me, it's been messy, but that required me to break down a lot of my judgments and fears and control, all the things. The season with Emmeline, man, that was deep-rooted performance and workspace theology. There was a moment that I found myself a couple months in Yeah. Where I was wrestling because I became aware that I thought I did everything right. I made the right choices. I avoided the right things, that this shouldn't have happened to me. I shouldn't have lost a daughter. So that's heavy. And that basically identified to me, like I remember thinking it for the first time and I was like, oh, that means that I think that I create, that I deserve something that Jesus has not given me, and that I create and control my life. That was a rough one. Yeah, the view of myself, authority, my relationship to authority, the view of who I was accountable to, what I was accountable for, responsible for, the illusion of what I could control was all the measuring sticks that were absolutely not ultimately important, but all the measuring sticks that I was putting myself up against, it all shattered. How I related to God changed. It was like a complete removing of comfort zones, and I was vulnerable. Pastor Perry Ann talked about, I think it was I can't remember I rewatched all their messages in the 4 days that I was prepping. But she talked about the dark matter, right? The dark matter, the dark side of the Lord. And I had actually never heard that before, but it communicates really clearly where I have been since 2019. And I feel like I'm in this space, the dark side of God. It's not demonic. It's not scary. But I was no longer in the sunshine and the rainbows side of God. I was no longer in the everything happens for a reason side of God. That crap was blown right out of the water, demolished. And it's hard because a lot of people are not living there. And so to be in a space that I have never found myself in before, and then to be in a space that the majority of people are not in, it's very isolating. You feel very alone. So recently, within the last 4 days, I have found that I am here once again. I've never left the dark place, but I am in a moment where I am sitting in the office of my beliefs of pastoral leadership. And he's disassembling everything. In the last 4 days, I was almost paralyzed with the fear of writing this message. And Friday night, I had a massive breakdown. And I'm sitting there like walking through, like just literally laying out all of my fears, all of my expectations, all of like the things on the table. And it's like I'm having a heavy reaction. Like I'm having a very heavy emotional reaction. And I'm like, man, I knew in my head, I was like, this is too heavy for, like I hadn't been processing this for the last 4 days. It all just rose to the surface unexpectedly, and I couldn't avoid it. And so then whenever I finally permissioned myself to like feel it, then it all came out, and it was shocking of how much there was. And so I realized I'm living in the belief system that like there's a story I'm telling myself. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Brene Brown. Yeah? She's a researcher. I think she might be a psychologist now, but she identifies as a researcher. She has a quote of the story that we tell ourselves. She said, when we believe that we're at risk and we tell ourselves a story so quickly we often are unaware we're doing it. Brown says that when something hard happens, our brain begs us for a story. And if you give your brain a story, it actually rewards you with calm. So I think that moment on Friday, I was unloading the story that I was telling myself. And I did it in the company of friends, trusted friends. I was being vulnerable. And I got to hear the story for the first time out loud. And then I also had the opportunity for them to speak truth back to me. And it's like the story started disassembling itself. At that point, the story I was believing myself about pastoral leadership and what was expected from the Christian church congregation. And you guys got lumped into that, sorry. It's not any of you individually. It's not like, oh, I feel like this person will say this to me, or, it's not even that clean, you know what I mean? It's just messy. But I literally was believing the following, that each one of my messages had to have at least 5 biblical references. It needs to be solid, clear, concise, easy to follow, convicting but not aggressive, challenging but not angry, a little bit of funny, lighthearted, feel good, but not emotional. Okay? I needed to be an expert of all things theology, spirituality, and the Bible. I needed to be the strong spiritual example, of course, on stage, but most definitely off stage. I had to have my ducks in a row. I had to have my kids in a row. Good luck. I think I failed right there. Like if none of the other ones felt unaccomplishable, that one would have nailed it right to the cross. I have to be the model of a good wife, also while being a great leader. I have to stand against the gender preferences or expectations with strength and not anger or emotions. I have to be aware of the world's news, events, and relations. I have to have a clear and set political view and never waver, change, or mix. And also never talk about it from the stage. And I have to be a counselor, a healer for the spirits, souls, and minds and marriages of this house. I call BS. I call Bible study on the whole thing. Because that's wrong. That's not what my Bible says. And frankly, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I cannot succeed at any of those things. And I think the illusion that I had to is what I was running up against. And I started processing. That list of demands was demanding that I become a slave to the snapshot. We talk about snapshots here, right? Let's look at the movie, not focus on the snapshot. It's so funny that all social media is just a bunch of snapshots. Even the news, a bunch of snapshots. So it's not uncommon that we are fixated or groomed to appreciate and value snapshots. Quick answers. Give me the gist. We get uncomfortable when we have to wait for the movie. The movie brings context. All of my list was lacking God's context, all of it. So what is context? Context provides meaning and clarity to the intended message, all the information you need to know to truly understand something. Context shapes all processes in your brain, wow, from visual perception to social interactions. And then something that's taken out of context, if a statement or remark is quoted out of context, the circumstances in which it is said are not accurately reported. So it seems to mean something different than the meaning it was intended. That meaning can be felt really strongly. I remember the first time that I became aware of context and the importance of it, the significance of it. Daniel, you're going to love this. It was with Wicked, the Broadway show Wicked. I don't remember how old I was when we went and saw it, but it was so clear to me. How many of you are familiar with Wicked, the Broadway show? Okay, how many of you are familiar with Wizard of Oz? Perfect, we'll start there. Wizard of Oz, there was a Wicked Witch of the West, right? He had like monkey things, and she was green, and all the things. Scary, in my opinion, as a child. Terrified. So Wicked is a spin and a kind of a precursor, right, Danielle, to the Wizard of Oz story, but it is the Wicked Witch of the West's story of her childhood. So you have this whole Broadway play where you're learning about her. She's growing up. You learn why she's green. You learn how she got there. You learn the relationship background of her and Glinda, the good witch. And it's beautiful. And you walk away actually kind of loving the Wicked Witch of the West. At least I did. And I walked away thinking, dang. How many other things that are perceived evil are really just misunderstood? It was huge for me. Broadway show. Everyone should go see a Broadway show. And that started this process of like, man, I just want to know the story. Everyone has a story. Nobody arrives at the place that you see them overnight. And I have yet to have this belief system destroyed, but my belief system so far is I think everyone's doing the best they have with the tools and experiences that they've been given. And when we see somebody's story, or we see a snapshot of our own life or somebody else's life, and it's taken out of context, we don't have the context for their life. We don't even sometimes have the context for our moment, especially when we find ourselves in a new moment. Our context is not going to fit over somebody else's life. Our context of our past is not going to fit over the context of our future, or even our present. Okay, I'm getting ahead, sorry. I did a little digging in my Bible study, in my BS moment. Love it. And I noticed a pattern. God often shows up in the Old Testament, which, did y'all know that testament refers to a covenant partnership? I thought that was a beautiful definition. That was a revelation to me. Thought I would share that with you. When God shows up in the Old Testament, there's absolutely no context for what he's doing, ever. And also, he rarely gives it. Love ya, but he rarely gives it. So creation, no context. Adam and Eve, no context. The garden, relationship with God, told of the tree, bad things are going to happen, don't do it. No context for bad things. Like they didn't even, anyway. Abraham and Isaac going up on the mountain, sacrifice your son, no context. Moses striking the rock, right? He had no context for the first time he struck the rock. Then he had context, and he decided to do it again. Fun fact, that's not what God was doing. He was wrong. Oh, it was wild. Then Moses leading people out of slavery into the promised land, no context for what was to come. These people they didn't have a context for freedom. So then they were worshiping an idol. They wanted somebody to rule over them. They wanted to be slaves. Then Jesus shows up in the New Testament. Again, covenant partnership, new covenant partnership. Shows up in the New Testament, and he brought all the disruption. There was a context established, right? The law was established. Moses went up on the mountain. He got the 10 Commandments. There was all the law, right? Because the Old Testament took 1,000 years to write, and people followed the rules. I mean, most of the time. Jesus shows up, and he just wrecks it. He just wrecks it all. It was awesome. But I cannot imagine the stress level that I would be living with on a constant basis had Jesus showed up and started wrecking my life and wrecking my context. Me, rule follower, fine to do the rules. I can do the law, Jesus shows up and says, just kidding, psych, you don't need it. I would think he was crazy. I would be like, nah, bro, you're gonna get yourself crucified. I'm out. Like, I'm not with you, bro. Like, don't pick me as your 12, because anyway. So I looked up like all the times that Jesus was misunderstood. It's like all of them. It's like the whole Gospels. So like when he's 12 and Mary and Joseph lose him, like, good job, Mary. Good job, Joseph. You lost Jesus, Son of God, not just your son. Like, I know we all leave him in the shopping mall on occasion, but you lost like the whole Son of God. Well done. And then they said, where were you? We were searching for you. And he said, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I would be in my Father's house? No context. What? Then Jesus predicted that he would suffer many things and be killed, and Peter rebuked him because he didn't understand what Jesus meant, and that Jesus was the Messiah. Why would he? That was funny. After Jesus' death, 2 of the followers said, we had hoped that I think Pastor Paul even said this, we had hoped that he would be the one who was going to redeem Israel. They misunderstood Jesus' mission, thinking that he was going to free them from Roman rule. And then the Samaritan woman thought that Jesus was talking about literal water, and he was talking about holy water. And isn't it interesting that misunderstandings can lead to death? The wrong context can make something that is different yet beautiful be sentenced to death. Because there's no context for how to control it. We feel uncomfortable being out of control. We feel vulnerable. We feel like something is threatening. Threatening us, threatening our well-being, threatening our future, threatening our kids, threatening lives, whatever. Our brains are demanding for us to tell it a story. And so this new thing that makes no sense, many times in stories often gets identified as a villain. In my experience at school, it was a rough one, and misunderstandings between me and my friend probably could have been rectified. But I was unknown to her, and I got labeled the villain. I threatened what she had known to be true. Because I didn't fit the context she had. That experience changed me. It's left me in kind of a constant state of wonder. You know, God's the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? Amen. Okay. Without context, that could be interpreted as God is singular. He's one way, never changing, never different. Yes-ish, and. I like to say and instead of the word but. It pairs two seemingly opposite things together in a marriage, which is actually a reflection of a lot of marriages. God is multifaceted. So we will never know all the edges, the depths, the mysteries of God. So to us, it can feel like he changes all the time, especially when he shows up different than he has before in our life, or if he's showing up different in somebody else's story. God also made us in his image, so with all the diversity, preferences, viewpoints, passions, talents, desires, characteristics, values, hopes, gifting, etc., the list can go on and on. Yet sometimes we still want to follow Christ. We still think that Christ's followers need to show up in the context that we've seen. What if we not only took the risk, what if we chose not to stay in the comfortable of our context? What if we chose to be uncomfortable in the waiting? What if we waited on God's context rather than trying to formulate our own? What if we told our brain to calm the hell down and wait? And I mean hell in the biblical sense in that term. What if we not only did this for our own story, but what if we could do it for the story of others too? We can cease from drawing conclusions of our past, our present, and our future just from a snapshot. Can we seek out and listen for heaven's story for ourselves and for others? Yes, we can. The answer is yes. Sure can. Yay! However, this is going to require, it actually demands a massive amount of vulnerability. Not just like a little bit, but like a lot. It takes courage, it takes patience, it takes hope, but all of it builds faith. This is anchored, and it rests in this action is anchored, and it rests in the belief that God is good, he's love. Jesus is the one and only Messiah, not us. That took me a long time to learn. Learning. And that he wastes nothing. Nene, you can come up. So one of the calls on this house is to be a dispeller of fear. It's so interesting. I was thinking about in the workings of this message, I was thinking about if you had the worship night, I think you heard it there, but man, it would be so easy to look around this house and look at all the sicknesses, look at all the challenges, look at all the afflictions that we're facing and think, ooh, what did they do? What did they not do? Or think, man, they must be cursed. We must be in spiritual warfare. And I'm not putting down spiritual warfare. And if you have that context, that's what you'll see. We could also, in light of the context of we are a house that dispels fear, don't you think we have to walk through something that scares the hell out of us? Guys, 3 days ago, I wanted to quit my job here with y'all. I wanted to say, bye, I'm better as a volunteer. I don't want to be tied to anything in this house, much less y'all's lives. It had nothing to do with y'all. It had everything to do with the story I was telling myself. I had to sit 4 days in that. And I had to face the thing that I was most afraid of. I had to face the fear. I had to choose to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not necessarily like posting something online and saying, look at my story. Like, it's not just like, those are snapshots, right? And there's vulnerability in snapshots. But also, you can choose to be vulnerable with people that you don't have to just go around and be vulnerable and oozing your life all over the place. There are safe places and trusted spaces to do that. And everyone and every moment is not that. But today, the way that moment looked for me is identifying it, standing it up in front of the public and physically nailing it to the cross. And that was scary for me. But I believe in the call on this house. I am this house. You are this house. We are this house. And if we're going to dispel fear, we got to be willing to be vulnerable, unguarded, and face it. It'll be 100 times messier this way. 100 times messier. I'd also say, if you're unsure, if you're 100% sure that this is not what you want to do, this is not what you want to be a part of, there is another house available for you, and it is not this one. I'm not telling you to leave. I'm not kicking you out. I'm not saying you don't belong here. I am saying we most likely are going on a journey that is going to be 100% messy. It is going to color outside of the lines of all of your life. And if that makes you 100% uncomfortable, there is a place for you that God can meet you at the place that you're in, and he can do beautiful things. If you're unsure of wanting to take that journey, you're willing to give it a shot, I think we really can do you good. And we'll be doing it together. It will be rough, and it will be exceptionally beautiful. Like, you don't even have context for the beauty that it will be. And that's probably the most wonderful part. I also know that there's going to be a grace that accompanies and shows up when it needs to, for you personally and for us as a corporate body to do this. There's going to be a grace that will guide you through the waiting, that will guide you through the vulnerability, pains, and also that will be with you as we shed the control, judgment tendencies that keep us protected or feeling secure. And I believe that we can begin to be a champion of each other because we are in this arena together. I'm going to quote Theodore Roosevelt because this is like one of my favorite quotes. It says, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, nor where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcomings. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms and great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." I believe we can dare greatly. I believe that we have a call on this house to explore the dark side of the Lord. And if you asked me a year ago, I would have said, nope. Whenever we decided for our year theme to be Beyond Strength, was one of the only vision team members that was like, do y'all know what you're asking for? This sounds awful. But in the context, we got a lot of illnesses and afflictions in the context of being in an exploration journey of exploring his strength beyond our own. I would say yes to that every day. Because it's almost guaranteed that afflictions are going to come in life. So the illusion that we can avoid them by whatever year theme we choose is actually ridiculous. And that's not what I actually thought, but it really will be beautiful. On individual levels and on a corporate level, it really will be beautiful. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this house. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you that you're in front of us with an invitation to explore the depths of who you are. I'm thankful and grateful for what we've known to be true about you. And I'm grateful for what we have yet to learn. Lord, I pray for soft eyes over this house. Soft eyes for us to see our stories differently, not just view them. For us to see other people's stories differently and not just view them. I thank you that we are sons and daughters. We are not slaves, and we are definitely not slaves to a snapshot. We are seated in heavenly places with you, and we have heaven's perspective. I thank you for the grace that is on this house and that will accompany us in this process. I thank you for your gentleness in the leading us down the road that is uncomfortable. I thank you for a strength and a hope that exists as we wait in the mystery, as we wait on you. We love you. We thank you for who you are. And we thank you for who you're calling us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. Abbey Church, thank you for taking this ride with me. I love you. And I hope you have a beautiful week. And as always, we will see you next week. Have fun.
Thank you so much for joining the Abbey service today. We are so thankful for you, and we pray that this message blessed you this week. Don't stop here. Stay connected with us by liking us on Facebook and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Please see below for additional ways to receive updates and news, as well as stay engaged with our Abbey community. You can also support the Abbey through giving on any of our platforms. We are grateful for your continued giving to help us reach people around the world and grow the kingdom through local and international missions. Thank you again for watching. We love you, and God bless.